the daily violence and gang wars that rule Rikers. Subscribe for more real crime stories. Like, share, and join the discussion below. Blood splattered across the cold, gray floor of Rikers Island cell block D as screams echoed through the night. Two inmates were locked in a brutal fight, one swinging a sharpened toothbrush, the other clutching a piece of broken metal from a food tray. Guards banged on the steel bars, shouting for backup, but no one dared to step in yet. The air was thick with sweat, anger, and fear. Someone yelled, "The King's got him!" The Blood King's got him, as the lifeless body of a young inmate collapsed against the concrete. The man's last breath rattled in his chest. Sirens blared. Lights flashed. Chaos ruled. It was another bloody night at Rikers, where violence wasn't just a possibility, it was the only rule that mattered. But just as the guards stormed in, someone whispered from the shadows, "It's not over yet. The real war starts tomorrow." 3 weeks earlier, 21-year-old Marcus Slim Turner arrived at Rikers Island for the first time. He'd been arrested for armed robbery in the Bronx. The moment he stepped off the bus, he could feel the tension in the air. Prisoners stared through the fences, their faces hard, eyes sharp like knives. It didn't take long for Slim to realize that Rikers wasn't just a jail, it was a battlefield divided by colors, tattoos, and unspoken rules. The first night, an older inmate named Rico warned him, "Keep your head low, kid. Don't talk too much. Don't owe nobody nothin'. You hear me?" Slim nodded, but curiosity got the best of him. He couldn't help but notice how every corner had its own crew. The Blood Kings ran the South Block, the Latin Knights ruled the East, and the 41st Street mob controlled the kitchen. Anyone caught in between didn't last long. A week later, Slim saw his first beating. A young man was accused of stealing cigarettes from another cell. Four gang members cornered him near the laundry room. They didn't stop until the boy was on the floor, bleeding and begging for help. The guards watched from a distance, pretending they didn't see. Afterward, they dragged the body away like nothing happened. Days turned into weeks, and Slim learned how to survive. He kept to himself, moved quietly, and avoided eye contact. But survival had a price. You couldn't stay neutral forever. One night during dinner, a tray slid onto Slim's table. Rico whispered, "You're with us now, Slim. You don't got a choice." Slim looked around. The Blood Kings were watching him. He didn't answer. His heart pounded in his chest. The next moment, the lights flickered. A loud crash echoed from the far end of the cafeteria. Then someone shouted. They hit Rico. The room exploded into chaos. Trays flew, fists swung, and screams filled the air. Slim ducked under the table as a chair smashed beside him. The gang war had begun again, and this time, there was no way to stay out of it. The sirens blared across the block as guards stormed in with batons raised high. The air was filled with the smell of sweat, metal, and fear. Inmates scattered, some ducking behind tables, others still throwing punches. Slim crawled under the bench, his hands shaking as boots pounded the floor around him. He saw Rico on the ground, blood spreading across his orange jumpsuit. His eyes were open, but he wasn't moving. Slim froze, his breath coming out in short, fast bursts. The guards pulled everyone apart, shouting orders, swinging batons at anyone who didn't move fast enough. But inside Rikers, violence never really stopped. It just went quiet for a while. By the next morning, the cafeteria was spotless again, as if nothing had happened. Only the whispers remained. They said Rico had been attacked by the Latin Knights. They said a deal had gone bad, something about cigarettes, phones, and protection money. But nobody knew for sure. Slim kept his head down, but he could feel eyes on him all day. Everyone knew he'd been close to Rico. And when your protector was gone, you became an easy target. A week later, the tension inside the cell block grew worse. The Blood Kings wanted revenge. Slim heard them planning in whispers at night. "We're gonna hit him back," one of them said. "They think they can touch one of ours and walk away?" Slim didn't want to be part of it, but staying out wasn't an option. That night, as the lights dimmed, a tall inmate named Dre sat beside him and said quietly, "You got two choices, Slim. You ride with us, or you ride with them. Neutral don't exist here. Slim nodded slowly. He didn't want trouble, but he didn't want to die either. Days later, the guards announced a yard break. The prisoners walked out under the gray sky, some laughing, some silent. The yard was split in half, Blood Kings on one side, Latin Knights on the other. The air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. Slim stood beside Dre, his stomach tight with fear. He could see one of the knights staring at him. Thin face, scar across his cheek, eyes cold and mean. Then, without warning, someone threw a punch. Another pulled out a shank. The yard exploded into chaos. Screams filled the air as dozens of inmates rushed forward. Slim tried to back away, but someone grabbed him by the collar and slammed him to the ground. He saw flashes of metal, fists, and blood everywhere. Guards shouted for backup, but it was already out of control. Slim crawled backward, gasping for air, when he saw the scar-faced knight pull a blade from his sleeve, aimed right at him. Everything froze for a second. Slim's heart stopped. Then, the knight lunged. Slim ducked just in time. The knife slashed across his shoulder, burning hot as it tore through his jumpsuit. He stumbled backward, his hand gripping the wound as blood soaked through the fabric. The yard was pure chaos, screams, punches, boots kicking up dust. The guards were shouting orders from the towers, but no one was listening. It was every man for himself. The scar-faced knight came at him again, his blade glinting under the pale sky. Slim's fear turned to something else, survival. He grabbed a broken piece of wood from the ground and swung hard. It cracked against the knight's arm, knocking the knife loose. Both of them went down, rolling through the dirt. Slim's vision blurred, his shoulder burning with pain, but he didn't stop. He hit the knight again, and again until the man stopped moving. A siren wailed. Tear gas exploded in the air. Guards poured in with shields and batons, dragging men down and cuffing whoever they could grab. Slim coughed, eyes stinging from the gas, as two guards pinned him to the ground. He didn't fight back. He was too tired, too bloody, too scared. By nightfall, the yard was empty again. 5 inmates were dead, more than 20 were injured, and the whole facility was locked down. No one talked. No one slept. The violence had changed everything. Days passed. Slim sat in solitary confinement, staring at the gray wall. The wound on his shoulder had been stitched, but the pain stayed. He could still hear the screams, the sound of metal clashing, and Rico's voice echoing in his mind. "Keep your head low, kid." A guard opened the slot in the door one morning and tossed in a tray of food. "You got a visitor," he said. Slim looked up, confused. Visitors were rare, especially for someone like him. They led him into a small room divided by a glass wall. On the other side sat Detective Harris, the same officer who had arrested him in the Bronx. The man leaned forward, eyes cold but curious. "You've been through hell in there, huh?" he said. Slim didn't answer. He just stared. Harris slid a paper across the glass. "I can get you out of Rikers early. But you'll have to talk. Tell me who's running the gangs from the inside." Slim's chest tightened.
He knew what that meant.
If he talked, he'd be a dead man the minute word got out. If he stayed quiet, he'd rot in a cell or die in the next riot. Either way, Rikers would still win. He looked down at the paper, then back at the detective. The walls seemed to close in around him, the echo of screams still ringing in his head. He took a deep breath. "If I talk," he whispered, "you better promise me one thing." Harris frowned. "What's that?" Slim's eyes hardened. "That I never see this place again." The detective nodded slowly. But before Slim could sign, a loud alarm blared through the hallway. Guards ran past the window, shouting. Another riot had started. The cycle of violence was beginning again, louder, bloodier, and closer than ever. Slim froze, the pen shaking in his hand, as the screams grew louder outside his cell. And just like that, Rikers Island reminded him, and everyone else, that peace didn't exist there. Only survival.